I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 14th, 2020 virtual meeting of the Public Works Committee. Could I have a roll call, Shelley?
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
And Alderman Weggie.
Here.
All present.
Move on to approval of the agenda. If there's not any changes, can we approve by acclamation? So be it. We have no announcements, appointments, or proclamations. Shelley, I believe you told me there were no, as far as citizen comments, no emails.
Correct. There are none.
Move on to report committee chair and alderman. I'd just like to tell Eric, I really like the way the Hanley Sports Complex turned out. You did a great job down there. I see you got the lights in, and I know there'll be more in your report later on, but it's a good job down there, Eric. Alderman Leahy.
No report.
Alderwoman Tice.
No report.
Alderman Weggie.
No report.
All right, we'll move on to the administrator's report. Paula, do you have anything?
Thank you, Alderman Lockmiller. A quick report. We have heard from Grow Solar, and they have kicked off the second year of the Grow Solar St. Louis program. It's off and running. They've started having the solar hour, and they are asking the city and all the other participating municipalities to help promote this partnership, and that's what's in your packet. So Janet is helping us to promote it. I believe they've had a total of about 65 people that have attended their Grow Solar Hour to date. So we will be promoting it, hoping that more and more of our residents participate.
Great. Anybody have any comments or questions? All right, thank you, Bola.
Mhm.
Move on to department reports. We had, back at the last board meeting, we had Karen Shaw did a great job on presenting some of the budget cuts that are being proposed. And I thought we'd maybe work with each department here and just get more into the weeds on what each department's doing. So let's start with Parks Department. Eric, I know you have that in another item. You can pick which one you want to do first.
Lockmiller, I don't know if he's on. I think we lost him. Dan's on and Lisa.
All right, well, we'll come back to Eric. I've jumped down to planning and development. Lisa, what do you have for us?
Okay, can you all hear me? All right, so we had submitted to Bola and Karen for their consideration some reduction in budget expenses for our department. And after looking at the planned development budget, we concluded that we could probably curb some expenses in the areas of advertising, travel and meetings within the department, some training, subscriptions and memberships, and also some printing costs, since we're doing much more of our business online and through online permitting systems. So the other area that we looked at was if there was any money possibly that could come from miscellaneous contractual expenses, of which an amount of $37,000 was budgeted for this year. And out of the $37,000 that was budgeted, that amount was going to cover Arcturus's contract for the Hanley Industrial Court project at $16,474. And then also for that additional meeting that was voted upon, an additional $950. And then also within that amount was $9,900 for Horner and Schifrin to continue to help staff with the stormwater project that was authorized by the board on April 6th. So with that, then we were going to still keep approximately $4,676 for property abatement. And then for the board's consideration was to go ahead and free up $5,000 that would have been used for property abatement. So I guess that's the report really for Public Works, is to see if we want to keep all of the money there still for abatement, which would be closer to $10,000, or again, if some of that abatement money could be used for COVID-19 response. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that or,
Anybody? What? So the abatement is, you've got a list of properties there that have code violations. That's where that abatement would get used.
correct. So last week, we actually sent out Tom McGee with Braggie's, and they abated 10 properties last week. Now, when they abated the 10 properties, and these aren't the ones that are included in the weekly report that we provide the board, but out of the 10 properties that were abated, these were mostly just for lawn cutting costs. So just to give you an idea, the expenses to abate those 10 properties last week was about $1,000. And that money usually just for lawn cutting and trimming does come back to the city relatively quickly. As soon as we bill these property owners, they do pay, so that's positive. So what the abatement money would still be used for is for the bigger jobs, like when they maybe have to abate properties and bring in more larger equipment like chainsaws, again, just other things, maybe remove dead trees. There's a lot of debris to remove off of these jobs. Those jobs have a tendency to run maybe anywhere from $2,000 to about $3,000. And so the properties that we have listed in the weekly report, those 8 properties, would be those larger jobs. Those are beyond just lawn cutting. They need more thorough or more work done to those properties to clean them up. So that's what those monies would be used for.
Are there any that we've been dealing with for quite a long while here that maybe need to be addressed this year?
Yeah, and then that's kind of the thing too, out of those properties, if you're all familiar with them, we've done more extensive abatement on them. 3 of the properties within the last 2 or 3 years, we've already done an extensive abatement, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to take care of the problem permanently. And so they're kind of more habitual ones. So, but still for the neighbors and just even for anyone really kind of on that street or in that area of town, I'm sure they still like it just to be cleaned up, even if it has a tendency not to stay that way.
Mm-hmm.
Are there safety issues, Lisa, in any, I'm sorry, may I? Alderman
Yeah,
Lyon.
go ahead.
Are there safety issues with any of these sites, or would you be concerned if you reduce the budget that there would be safety concerns?
So out of those properties that are listed weekly, there are 2 that the next step in those would be to get a structural engineer to verify that the structural integrity of those structures are compromised, and they actually would have to be properties that should be demoed. Now that's going to be, that's more like what we did here at around City Hall when we purchased those properties and did demo work. So those are obviously more extensive. When we would get to that point, we would definitely have to come before the board and try to get some dollars allocated for demolition projects like that. So I guess what it comes down to in terms of the budget is if the committee would want to recommend that just all of the money, the $37,000 that was already budgeted, to stay in that account for this year, which then would give us close to $10,000 to abate what we can this year. And then did we want to go ahead and give other reports in terms of things that our department is working on with like the stormwater project?
Steve, you're on mute.
If I may interject, I think that
Yeah.
in Lisa's report, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Lisa, there are a list, if you have access to board docs, as part of your report, there are a list of properties. And I think if you could just provide a high level overview of some of the code enforcement issues pertaining to these properties, that would give the committee a better idea whether they want to consider asking Karen and I to put the 5,000 back into the budget. So, because from what I hear you say, if they're just primarily grass, tall grass and things like that, and you did 10 and it cost 1,000, then perhaps we don't need to add the 5 back. But if, you know, some of the expenses are greater and they include exterior maintenance, then that might give the committee a better idea of what you need the money for.
So the 8 properties, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the 8 properties that are listed in the weekly report are ones that we're going through abatement with. And out of the 8, again, 2 would be complete demolition projects, which again, that can run into obviously higher thousands of dollars that we would have to find the monies for to complete those demolition. And the 6 other projects, again, would be ones that are beyond just the weed cutting and trimming, but we'd have to have a company, it still could be Braggie's, but they have to come in with larger equipment and do more extensive abatement. And those projects, again, maybe run about $200 to $3,500 a piece if they've got a lot of debris they have to remove, dead trees, things like that.
But does that type of abatement, does that get added on to their property tax at the end of the year and we recoup that right away? I mean, at the end of the year?
Yes, it would. So again, we would have a pretty good shot, I would think, of trying to still collect on that. All of this money eventually would be recouped by the city, but it's just a question of when.
Well, I don't know what the rest of the committee thinks, but I would think maybe we put off demolition for this year since it far exceeds what we have available anyhow. And just put that towards cost savings. Everybody all right with that? That direction? Andy?
I would tend to agree with you, but picture yourself as being one of the adjacent neighbors to one of the houses that is in a position where it realistically should come down. And tell me how they feel when you tell them, because of cost savings and stuff, we're going to push it to next year, so leave it for a whole nother year. I believe, Lisa, the 2 houses in particular are owned by the same person, and they've just been neglected for God knows how many years to get this far? Or
Yes.
is this the one that's got the broken pipes and stuff that rotted out the inside?
No. There's 2 properties on this list that are owned by the same individual.
And that's the ones that would come down for demolition?
No, those
Oh,
just
good.
need extensive abatement, but would not be demolition projects.
Okay.
I should mention that if we were to abate all 9 properties, Lisa, what would be the approximate cost? Because I don't believe that's in the budget this year.
No, it's not in the budget. So again, just maybe a rough estimate would be about 6 of the projects would run $2,000 to $3,000 a piece. And then the 2 demolition projects, maybe I don't know if Dan would maybe be able to recall what we paid for some of the demolition projects here around the city hall and fire station.
With or without asbestos?
Without asbestos, it's 15, 20, with asbestos, probably 20, 25.
Yeah, go more. So, yeah.
So yes, we don't have
How
the
much
money
did he
currently
say?
in the budget to do all of the projects.
Lisa, how much was it? Did Dan say?
Maybe roughly around $15,000
Yeah.
for each one.
And how many do you have?
That would be 2.
So need at least
Oh, okay.
And the rest? How much? You said 3,000, and how many is that?
Right, probably about 15,000 for the others.
So what is that? 45,000 you would need, and there's only 5,000 in the budget.
To play with it.
Yeah, that's,
Yes.
Steve, I'm gonna, if I may. Lisa, if we apply for the $20,000 community improvement grants, would that qualify to be an acceptable expenditure to clean up these properties? Or do we actually do the residents a better service by giving the $5,000 out per home to let them improve an individual home?
So I don't know if just abatement work or demolition is a eligible
The
use
thing?
of CDBG funds. I would have to check on that. And then with that $20,000 that comes through the grant program, as you mentioned, generally it's been split up into $4,000 or $5,000
Yep.
grant assistance to help homeowners.
And I believe there's a waiting list for that, correct, Paula?
That
Yes,
is correct.
that is correct.
And that one is the CDGB grant public hearing. We are going to bring that before the board at the June 15th meeting. So that's coming up.
Yep. Okay.
And I guess moving back, what happens in the courts that the owner just isn't made to tear it down? Why do we have to go in and tear it down? Why isn't the owner pressured to do so?
Well, again, it could be a whole host of reasons. I mean, I have to say, we do work with some of these property owners for a long time before it comes to this. And because this is really what we want to try to avoid, is for the city to have to abate any of these situations for obvious reasons. But there's just some, that's why, again, we have this handful that we just have now spent, we think, enough resources on in terms of staff trying to just have them abate those properties. And so now it's really probably up to the city that's going to have to step in to correct them.
Brandon?
So are all 9 of these properties, are you saying they need to be taken down? Is that what abate means in this context?
No, there is only 2.
Sorry, I missed that. Which are the 2?
That would be the 2647 Helen and the 2633 Salem.
And what's the code violation that requires them to be knocked down?
We would have, again, the next step is to have a structural engineer to go out and check if the structural integrity of these structures is a problem, which I think that's what we would get. If you go past these properties, I think it would be obvious that they're well beyond being able to be refurbished or remodeled. So there's definitely holes in the roof of some of them, and that they're pretty far gone. So,
But there's not a code violation on them?
yes, they fall under the dangerous buildings, which is another section of the code. So we're beyond just the point of nuisances and needing property abatement, but those 2 would be considered dangerous buildings. So that's why we have to go through the administrative hearing process in order to move forward with abating those. The municipal court system can't render those decisions, so.
Nancy?
So can I get back to the original question? Are you asking us whether the committee favors reducing the abatement amount to $5,000 down from the current $10,000 that you have in the budget? Was that the original question?
So it's been reduced from 10 to 5. Right.
Right. So this might be a place that I'd like to keep the money in, but not knowing the bigger budget picture. I mean, we know what we presented 2 weeks ago at the board meeting. I'm assuming we'll get much more updated information on Monday. This seems a long time to talk about a $5,000 issue. But if this is money that the city might eventually get back, I would probably favor keeping it at 10,000 if it's something we can afford. And you'd have to come before us if we're going to tear down houses because you don't have the money budgeted. So.
Okay. So that's what, Bull, is that how it's reflected in the, what Karen presented last Monday?
Right. There's one of the slides we list, just a minute here.
So we would just leave it as is.
We would leave it as is. I believe on slide
17.
17, right. We list under community services 15,000, 15,000 even. So that 5,000 is part of the savings there. And I can include an item on that agenda for Monday so that as we present updated information, if at that time the board would like to consider things to restore, then, you know, you all can have that discussion at that time.
Because just to be clear, is grass cutting and that type of thing, that part of the abatement we get back right away. If we tear down a building, we don't get that back. We file a lien and we don't get that back till that property is somehow sold. Is that correct?
No.
It
So-
depends. The owner, you know, every time they have to pay their property tax is notified of that outstanding amount.
For a demolition?
So, right, the demolition amount. So they can choose to pay it off, or usually you find that owners of properties like that aren't paying their property taxes on a regular basis anyway. So then it becomes when it's sold. And that could be a long time.
So Nancy, is that what you're saying? Leave it in the budget, in the cuts?
Well, I was saying put it back, but maybe we just have it as an item. I mean, it's hard to talk about one item when we don't have a bigger picture of what's going on. So I hear about people complaining about these homes. So as long as there's some money there, as long as the $5,000 remains, that's good. But if the additional $5,000 can be found somehow and it's going to be well used, then that's fine. And we don't have money to tear the house down as it is.
Right. All right. So everybody in agreement just to leave as is then? All right.
Yep. Okay.
Second.
All right, Lisa, go ahead. You had something else?
So an update on the stormwater drainage control ordinance that we're preparing and that we're working with Horner and Schifrin with. So everything should be presented to this committee at the June 11th meeting. I talked with Christy Wilson. An update is that she will have the best management practice BMT manual ready for us for the review like on June 3rd. So staff will review it and get that out to the Public Works Committee before your meeting. We've also went ahead and solicited the RFQ for on-call engineering services for stormwater management plan review and other stormwater projects. Those RFQ submittals are due May 27th. So we're hoping also to have a recommendation to the Public Works at your next meeting. Then of course the decision will have to be still made in terms of the ordinance, how we're going to apply the stormwater control ordinance to what types of projects. And then once we get this all packaged up and presented to you at the June meeting, then we would present it to the Board of Aldermen at the July 20th Board of Aldermen meeting.
Okay. Anybody any questions on that? Okay, seeing none. I think you had some updates on the hotel and kitchen conservatory.
I've tried to contact both parties and I haven't talked really to either one of them yet. So, but we have put in calls to both Ann Corey with the Kitchen Conservatory and Kevin Chapman with Equus. So we're hoping that we still hear good news that those projects will be moving forward. So the building permit was issued on the hotel project, but they haven't started yet. And
They've leveled up the whole property.
yeah, they did some environmental work and, right,
Haven't have anything from there.
correct. And the Kitchen Conservatory, there really hasn't been any activity on that job site at this point.
You haven't pulled a demolition permit or anything?
No, they have not.
What else?
I think that was everything that I had.
Well, there's a administrative regarding 9130 Pine and 9140 Pine. Is that just informational only as to where the status of those?
It is.
Yes.
It was something she sent out today.
All right, if there's no other questions for Lisa, I guess we can move on to Dan.
I think I'm unmuted. All right,
we
I
can-
can hear myself. There's actually two reports that I have in here. The first one was where we last left off. Brentwood Forest was required to use trash receptacles. So there's, oh, I see a hand. Oh, maybe not.
May I ask if there's someone else in the council chambers that your audio is on, if you could mute? Just having a hard time understanding, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. But if you recall, I believe it was the February or March meeting, but it was before the whole COVID thing. They were required to figure out something, either use dumpsters, use trash receptacles. They still haven't made a firm decision just because of the whole delay getting with the county, but they plan on having a board meeting and then discussing internally what they plan. Their preferred option would be to require the property owners to have receptacles. But the problem with that is you can't leave a receptacle out per their bylaws. You're not supposed to store it on the porch, and not every unit has a storage unit attached, and there aren't any garages to store the receptacles. And they would make the homeowner purchase at their cost.
Well, Dan, I talked to Kathy O'Neill, and they are in communication with the director of health, the health department over there, who's ever oversees this.
Okay.
And they are moving towards something. She wouldn't elaborate, but I think the county health department is at least at bay right now with them, just with the communication they have going on. So I think, right now it's kind of in Brentwood Forest lap, and they're trying to work something out with the county.
Okay.
So I don't think we have, there's not really, I know you're giving us information, but I don't think there's anything we have to do right now, correct, Paula?
That is correct.
Right.
Hey,
Okay.
so
Yeah, that was
let's move
just
on to item
a
two.
brief update on that, and then we can go into the budget reduction analysis. If you recall, the slide showed operations and capital for each department. So the operations that I listed is in a spreadsheet. So it breaks down to $98,000 that was in one of your slides. So we have some savings for salaries, overtime, benefits, petro products, because gas, diesel isn't nearly as expensive as what it was year over year, forestry, and then full-time employees, overtime. We just haven't had a whole lot of overtime needs just because it hasn't been a very severe winter. And then, of course, the overtime usually gets tapped again around Brentwood days, just because everybody's typically working. And then miscellaneous contractual. So if you look at the individual lines, the summation of that's 98,000. And then if you look at the capital side, there's things that we've just postponed altogether. So there's $10,000 for a skid steer pavement breaker attachment. There's $4,000 for a planer, $3,000 for an evaporator fan, $3,200 for an ice machine. And then the bigger two items would be fleet. Truck 76 is booked at $65,000. Truck 71 at $45,000 is the budget. So for that subcategory 6530, which would be public works capital expenses, it's $130,200. And then the other subcategory, which would be sidewalks and streets, which is subcategory 6535, we've got carryover of mill and overlay asphalt streets from 2019 into 2020, and that was roughly $170,000. And then concrete, roughly ice cream specialties to Metro Lighting, $203,129. So the total for that's $373,034. And when you add up both lines, 6530 and 6535, the grand total is a little over 503,000. So if we don't do any of the streets, and we've already have savings in operations, it's a little over 600,000. But the asphalt streets, Strassner, Urban, Wrenwood, Park Ridge Alley, it'd be nice to do those if we could come back to normal on budget, just because our asphalt concrete's a little more forgiving if you postpone it year over year. But if we can't do it, we can't do it. So that's pretty much it.
And that's what's depicted in, those cost cuts are what's depicted in Karen Shaw's workup.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Dan? Dan, I think the mayor was kind of looking into maybe if there was some savings in the sanitation department via the yard waste collection. Were you able to look into that at all?
Oh, yeah, yeah. If you wanted to talk about overall sanitation, that's an item later on, or we can move it.
Well, I think we were
Yard
just
waste,
talking about,
cycling.
we were just talking about yard waste, possibly curtailing some of that as part of your savings.
Yeah, that was a separate project that we looked into savings. If we were private sector, they did not collect at the end of March. They did not collect at all in April, but they did resume. I have Republic Services. They resumed last week.
Okay.
So we did look at savings if we were to move to, say, a once a month collections on yard waste.
All right. But I don't see, those figures aren't here, right?
They're not part of this report.
Okay.
Yeah, 9C is when I dove a little bit deeper into some of those.
All right, well, we'll put it off till then.
Okay.
We'll talk about it in full. All right, did Eric ever come back?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Nancy, I'm
Can I
sorry.
ask a quick question to Dan?
Yeah.
So Dan, do you anticipate, I mean, I know it's not in the budget now, but like if there was money to do the streets, if those, are contractors who do mill and overlay less busy than they were? And would you anticipate that being what you budgeted or less, or?
I think it'll be less, one, because petroleum, which is a big component of asphalt, is, remember, barrels of oil were going negative. So I know they're positive now, but the cost of the materials less. The contractors are looking for work because a lot of the work that they had scheduled was canceled. So I know whenever we get into the Brentwood bound segment, you'll see that we had some really competitive bids for the demolition. And I foresee that happening with anything that you're bidding competitively, that you'll have really good prices.
Thank you.
And if things do get rosy, how long would an RFP for that type of work take to turn around, Dan?
We already have the RFP. Like I said, that was a carryover from 2019. So all we have to do is change the dates and make some minor tweaks to the RFP, bid it for about a 2-week period, get the bids, bring it back to committee, and assuming the committee gives its blessing, then bring it to the full board. There's still plenty of time. If we were to do this in the next month or two, it would become dicey if we did it, say, like in October, November, when plants are shutting down for the winter. But if we bid this anytime during the summer, I think you could still do it before the end of the year.
Okay. Any other questions for Dan? All right, let's jump back to Eric. Eric, are you there?
I am. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we are back ready to go. I have a few updates in my department report. I'm going to kind of skip around, take the easy ones, and jump to the last one, which is the budget, which I figure will take the longer time. The first one, which is a park agreement, there was a question about the remodeling and usage, and I tried to reach out to Richmond Heights, and due to COVID-19, they don't have an update yet. Just with everything going on and staffing and everything else, they just don't have anyone right now that can pull those reports. So we'll be working with them on that in the upcoming months. Update on music on the menu. That's another fun COVID-19 discussion. With the latest St. Louis County reopening plan that came out last Friday, I can tell you a lot of people in the Parks and Recreation world was disappointed with what all the recommendations were. But if you've gone through it as much as I have, you know that they basically put a limitation on gatherings of no more than 10 people. And if you do that, then you're really not going to be able to have anything like music on the menu. So right now, everyone's kind of in a holding pattern to see when those next sort of updates come out, the next recommendations come out. The county executive page really didn't say. He just said, we relied upon data. He did say he'd give everyone a week. Once he has the next set of orders ready to go, they have a week to kind of put everything into effect. So we don't expect anything to come before early June. So our June music on the menu is looking very likely like we'd have to cancel. In contact with all of our bands, so that kind of they all know. I mean, everyone understands where we're at in this process. Our band, we've already kind of let them know, and we've already booked them for 2021 if we need to. So because it's a band that we were really excited about. So if we need to keep pushing back, we will. So we already talked about if we can hold it, what we can do, and basically painting field floor and painting basically different spots where people could sit and making sure we can social distance on that field if that's what we need to do. A lot will depend on the guidelines that come out from St. Louis County. The next one, which is, sorry.
Hey, Eric, could you hold on a second? Brandon had a question.
Yep.
Hey, Eric, on the music on the menu, have you guys thought about like doing a virtual one where we basically tell residents to congregate in their own front yards, less than 10 people, and we live stream the band out into the town? Something
We've
like that.
talked about it. We have, and that would be fun. We could definitely do that. There would be the cost of having the band. We'd have that cost anyway if we continue to do it. But we're looking at that. We're looking at other different live streaming things or other different options to kind of keep the community engagement going. That's one thing we've talked about. We're talking about a drive-in movie night. So something else to you can stay in your cars and not have to get out of your car, so you still social distance within your car, and different options there. So I think we can definitely do that. That's something we can definitely do if that's an option. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be creative and do what we can. I certainly agree with the cost on if it is a band, if that's an approach we wanted to take. But it seems like as much as we can keep bands working and those kind of things would be good, and still for the community too.
Sure. No, I know bands like many different industries are taking a hit, and a lot of friends who are in bands, and they're ones without health insurance too. So if they're not playing, they're not paying for health insurance and those type of factors. So that's something I can talk to staff more about and give Bull an update and let you guys know through a weekly report.
Thanks.
Sure. The next one was Ameren UE. As Bull kind of mentioned, we've been giving you guys kind of update on the neighborhood solar program update. The last update I got, which was late February, was that they had that we're in the top 5 of the program, but unfortunately, we most likely would not be one of the finalists to move forward in the program. And the reasoning was that they really wanted, because ours was a roof array of the solar panels, and they really Ameren is moving more toward I just lost it. Sorry. We're moving to the carport parking lot arrays because they get more visual bang for their buck that way. It's people see it more and they don't get to see the panels on the roofs. So the discussion was, could we put panels on our parking lot? And that's something that briefly with Bolo about, and with the plans for the parking lot, and also in the comprehensive master plan that the city did, we felt like it wouldn't be the best usage. And then we were talking with Ameren about would there be other locations they'd be interested in. Also knowing that at one point they were discussing the site next to the Metro Garage, which obviously we don't own at this time, but may in the future. But it's something that we might be a possibility, as we said, moving forward. I've seen arrays as part of kind of almost pavilions over park benches, and I talked to them about that. And so we gave them a bunch of ideas to go back to their committee with. And that's right when kind of everything hit. So I just took a look earlier. They haven't announced anything. So my guess is they kind of went through this whole issue with COVID-19 and probably delayed all their sort of meetings and things like that. And so I can reach out to our contact with Ameren and see where they're at. It is a multi-year plan. So if they don't pick us this year and they decide to move other portions, other departments this year, we can obviously push for next year or a following year.
Brandon, do you have a question?
I've always been under the assumption we did own that land next to the bus maintenance, and that's why we had to approve the substation that was installed there and all those. Can we say, or do we know who actually does own that? Because I'm surprised that Brentwood doesn't.
Steve?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, Bi-State still owns that land. The cost of it is about $490,000. They agreed to sell a portion of that land to Ameren with the city's approval because Bi-State knew that the city was interested in purchasing that land ultimately. So that's why.
Okay, thanks.
All right, go ahead, Eric.
But to tag on to that, I mean, that is stuff that as I look for grants, that's, a land grant to hopefully help purchase that property, something that's on my agenda to do as well. Finally is the longer report, which is the department's COVID-19 response. And that memo was in the packet as well. It's obviously really early, but through February, the department was on track to meet our year-end budgetary goals, revenue and expenditures. But as we saw March come on, we saw the prevalent COVID-19 became more prevalent, we did start to see a decrease in revenue. A lot of rentals started backing off. It's coming in for the ice rink, so we started to see that pretty early on. So to offset that, we started looking at expenditures right away. Talk about the capital projects that we've already started. We did start the community center sand floor project because the ice rink did go down. We did finish up the Hanley Sports Corridor project. I think you guys were mentioning, that's when I lost you guys. Hopefully you do like it. We are very excited about the way it looks. We just want to use it. It's a nice project that's now just kind of sitting there right now, but we'll be excited to use it. The park maintenance dingo, we had already purchased that, and that was actually delivered in late February, so that had already been in place. And obviously we'd started the survey services throughout the city of Brentwood, and so we have a report update on that tonight. And so kind of put a halt on all of our capital projects moving forward after that. And started to figure out where we could cut in some expenditures pretty quickly. The next part of the memo is just kind of stuff that you heard in the presentation. There's the one sort of caveat is what I did was add, with my budget being a tad bit different, is a revenue decrease as well. Because we did see a large decrease in fees and charges, primarily with room rentals and ice rink fees and charges. So as soon as we shut down the Brentwood Recreation Complex, we started having to give back refunds for meeting room rentals through March and April, large refunds for the Learn to Play or Learn to Skate program for the skating classes for the ice rink, the Brentwood Hockey League, and then a bunch of hockey rentals. And so we started to see that coming right away. We were fortunate that the ice rink was supposed to shut down in mid-April. So April, we didn't see as large of a decrease in revenue because we were already planning a mid-April through the end of May shutdown for the ice rink. So that does help us with the revenue decrease. But if they continue to go further past into June or July, if they continue to keep facility cars shut down, we'll see a larger decrease in revenue than this 113 that I put in there. That's one caveat to that statement. So that kind of led the grand total of about $600,000, which was my goal to figure out where we could come up with operational cost containment, which is 13% of our total revenue. So I put in the chart that you guys saw in the presentation. But again, what we added was where that about $110,000 of cost containment comes from. And again, you kind of see it listed below. Part-time staff is primarily all the staff who are not in the building right now because the building's closed. Full-time staff, we did have a full-time vacancy with a parks foreman position. We're actually had set up interviews when we closed the building, and we called all the candidates and said, look, unfortunately at this time, we're gonna have to put this position on hold. If we're able to call you guys back in the future, we'll let you know. And I think all of them actually understood. A couple of them said, we expected this phone call, to be honest. So that's where most of that comes from. We also had some cost savings from just some other places there. The operational expenditures at $112,000. We're cutting the educational benefits. We put that in the budget every year, just in case someone wants to take a class, but we haven't paid that. We haven't had anyone take us up on that, so we feel confident we're cutting that pretty early. The supplies, materials, advertising, just kind of that caveat. Happy to talk about any of those if anyone has any questions. But that got us to our $112,000, and then capital is all the projects we hadn't started. So the parking lot, Brentwood parking lot and pathway project, the Brentwood Park Pavilion renovation and restroom renovation, the Hanley Park Comfort Station, which would really be the next sort of key piece to Hanley Park, to that renovation of that whole park, Memorial Park, Busy Bee design, and then Truck 61. We hadn't started replacing Truck 61 yet, so obviously we put that on hold and are crossing our fingers that that'll last another year. So that's where we're at right now. Our uncertainty. Sorry?
I was just going to see if anybody had any questions for you.
Sure.
All right. Anything else, Eric?
Not right now. I will have more later up on the agenda.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. That puts us down at the consent agenda, where we just have the minutes from the February meeting. If everybody's read those minutes, have no changes, can we just do the consent agenda by acclamation? All in favor? Aye. All right. Move on to old business. We have, I guess this is Lisa. We have the bids from the landscape architect.
Yes. So per the direction of the city administrator, staff was given direction to go ahead and look at all of our on-call agreements, at least about every 5 years. So it was back in August of 2015 when the city adopted an ordinance to enter into an agreement with Planning Design Studio to provide landscape architect services to the communities, or to the community, excuse me. So we went ahead and issued an RFQ on February 16th, and we did receive 5 responses to the RFQ. So myself, Dan, and Eric, we evaluated the proposals, and we did include the evaluation form in your packet. So we decided that we would like to go ahead and call in for interviews Krishner and Planning Design Studio. And after we interviewed both companies, we were satisfied that both companies could provide the type of quality of services that the community is looking for. And there are differences though. Planning Design Studio is a smaller firm. Krishner has quite a bit more employees and is also a multidisciplinary firm, which could be of value to the city with some, especially like city commission projects and so forth. So we also laid out kind of some strengths of each firm in the staff report. But overall, the evaluation team felt that having on-call agreements with actually 2 landscape architects firms could really give the city a lot of options and try to pair whatever landscape architect firm maybe had certain expertise with a certain type of project. So that would be our recommendation to the Public Works Committee, is to have the staff look at trying to put together, negotiate agreements with both firms. There is no immediate impact to finance or operations to just enter into an agreement. They would both be on call. And so how it would still work for the company that we would have do the site development plan reviews, the way that is handled is when I have a development application for a project, I take the preliminary plan and I give it to the firm, and they actually prepare a scope of work and an estimate to do that plan review. And the developer or the applicant gives us that deposit to cover that scope of work. And then we initiate the project. And so that gets put in an escrow account. So in essence, the developer is the one that covers the cost for the landscape plan review. And in terms of if it would be a project for a city commission project, then obviously there would have to be a scope of work that would be drawn up and a separate contract to be approved by the board for that particular project. But we did include also in the staff report the hourly rates for both of these firms. Planning Design Studio actually had the lowest rate of all the 5 submittals that we've received. But Christner's hourly rates also were very, very competitive. So at this time, again, staff would recommend that the Public Works Committee would approve the selection of both Planning Design Studio and Christner to enter into on-call landscape architectural service agreements with the city, and then forward this on to the Board of Aldermen for approval.
Lisa, I kind of like that the Kirchner's has the ability to do urban planning and design. As we move, once years from now, as we get done with the Brentwood bound area and we redevelop along Manchester Road, I guess they would be useful in that capacity as far as urban planning.
Yeah, Christner, again, is a multidisciplinary firm. They do a lot of design work, urban planning work. And so, yes, I think that they would be really good for just to try out on certain projects and just, try to get some new ideas as well. So that would definitely, I think, be a benefit to the community.
Brandon?
On this assessment, so these are the summaries. Do you guys have guidelines that are given out to the 3 scores of what criteria and how these should be scored?
Yes, that's included with the RFQ on how we would, and that's also how the RFQ then is prepared and submitted, is by really our criteria that we would use to evaluate each firm.
Right. So when you're scoring general overview of the company, there's a set of guidelines that the 3 judges are using to score that?
Yes.
Could we see that? Here's my concern.
Okay.
We're very comfortable. We're very comfortable with one of these. It seems like we've used them for a lot of time. They've done a lot of projects. I don't know. Sometimes closeness builds comfort with a bidder.
But I think can I unmute?
Yeah, we hear you.
What? Oh, now you're muted.
I think in what Lisa just said, so this is based on qualification. And then based on the direction from this committee, then we would negotiate. But initially, if you were just looking at cost, I think that's what Lisa's saying, that theirs was the lowest of the 2. So just a rebuttal to what Alderman Weggie said.
Is that it, Brandon? I mean,
Well, for the answer on if we would be able to see what those criteria are and how this is scored. What is the guidance given to the judges?
Okay. Full, is that available?
Yeah, so, I'm looking at the packet and I noticed that the evaluation scoring is not here. We should have included that. So I'm happy to send that to the committee right after this committee. So that you know, the three individuals that Lisa mentioned, including herself, Dan, Eric, and Lisa, were instrumental in working jointly to put this RFP together. So given that their subject matters in their field, and having worked on this for many years, we jointly know what we would be looking for in a partnership with a consultant. But we can definitely share the RFP that's on the website. We can share that with the committee, but in terms of specific criteria and what they're looking for, we would never provide that to a vendor or someone bidding on the project. And I believe that Kevin O'Keefe, the city's attorney,
I'm not saying that.
said that many times.
I'm asking for it for us. You would not give that criteria to the bidders. Exactly what you said, Bola. And this is one of my issues. We are very close with some of these suppliers. The people who have worked with them for years know exactly what they want. Are we getting the benefit of bidding these out and looking at other companies, or was this a predetermined determination?
I would hope not, because for you to suggest that it is gives no confidence in your staff. So I would hope it's not.
Go ahead, Andy.
Are you, Andy, is that you? All right.
Yes, that's me. I'm going to second what Brandon's bringing up, and I'll go back to the incident or the service that we asked them to provide 2 years, 3 years ago, Bola, that we were looking at gazebos on one of the park islands. I think we paid a fortune for a touchy-feely, and the residents came back not happy with what we were going after. I don't know if it's that we didn't communicate very well as to what we were looking for, but I think we spent a fortune for something that never got off the ground. And I think Brendan's right. Sometimes we get just too comfortable with the same people we've always used. So I understand it. At the same token, when you go for the RFP, I'm looking for somebody that can professionally do the job and effectively is cost effective. Based on what you're looking at what we were given as rates, it seems that the two that you have scored best and are cost effective. So as much as Brendan, I don't know what we're getting with the judges, what's your criteria to get for a 3, a 5, or a 15? I don't know that that's going to help us a whole lot. But I like the fact that we raised the discussion.
This doesn't look to be very time sensitive, is it, Bola or Lisa?
No, we'll continue to use the ones we have until a decision is made. It's very simple.
I mean, if we took this up at the June meeting before we forward onto the board with the criteria that Brandon's looking for,
I don't have an issue with it.
And I understand we have to do that in a sensitive communication to the board. Right, I assume you wouldn't want to put that out in the public, but I'll leave that up to you.
It'd be a confidential.
okay. All right. Well, then let's just hold off until the next meeting. Move on to item B. It's the survey services for the city of Brentwood, and it's an update. I don't know, is this Eric?
Yeah, I'll be taking this one. Again, this is something that Dan, Lisa, and I have all been working on. TWM has completed their boundary research and field work. They provided us their preliminary research, and plat work, and which has indicated a few things. One, the pathway from Bridgeport and White, they did find a 3-foot wide walkway and a 15-foot wide service alley in the original plat. The city vacated the walkway easement, but the service alley is still in effect. The pathway from White to Swim Club Lane, that little pathway that goes down to Swim Club. The current path is not on an easement. If the city does have an easement, it's unrecorded, so we're trying to figure that one out. Manderley and Hilldale. TWM did find documents conveyed the right of parcel on Hilldale to the city, but not the width. So we don't exactly know how much or how wide that parcel is. So the pathway connecting Whitehall to Parkside, the ordinance for the maintenance of the sidewalk for the portion of sidewalk connecting to Yorkshire Lane Court for the city, but there's no, the easement for the pathway in Whitehall is dedicated only to the owners of Whitehall. So basically the city has the easement all the way basically to Whitehall, which is how we've been maintaining it. Yorkshire Lane to Southcote, the city has no claim to any of those easements there. A Court, there's a right of way that connects the pathway to Mary Kay and the parent easement on Parkside, the TWM could find no easement. So what TWM has done to date is provide the preliminary plats of the surveys and the encroachment all together in a spreadsheet. And so the next steps are staff needs to review all the preliminary plats and encroachments and make sure that there's questions, provide any questions and comments back to TWM for a response. TWM will then finalize the boundary surveys, the plats, and all the encroachment data. And then what we'll do is we'll determine if there's any additional title work that TWM needs to complete. We'll take that, we'll bring any additional title work, a final research update of what TWN has, and any suggestions for any additional title work or topographical survey. Back to you guys in June.
Any questions for Eric? All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
I guess this is Dan's sanitary services discussion. Sanitation, rather.
Yes, going back to your original question about yard waste, there's information about yard waste, there's information about regular refuse, just regular trash and recycling. So there's all kinds of attachments. So I won't go through any of them in super detail, but I'll hit the highlights. For yard waste, we actually did look at suspending services. There was just a scenario that we ran. And if we were to suspend when the private companies were suspending, it would have occurred around April 29th. And we would have suspended services for yard waste, which occur on Wednesdays. We would have skipped basically 3 Wednesdays in a row and then collected on the 4th Wednesday and then done the same repeat, 3 cycles with no collections and then 1 week with a collection. So when we looked at that, we were assuming we could save roughly 75% of the disposal fees. We would have a reduction in fuel since we wouldn't be driving every week. And then of course, a reduction in labor. So the rough cost was about $2,000 for that 3-week hiatus where we wouldn't be picking up. Now on that 4th week, it's hard to predict how much people will put out. They might just store it for the 3-week period and throw everything out at the curb, which is gonna cause you a lot of grief with picking all that up and making multiple trips to the dump. But it was something we looked at. So I know that there's a graph with your packet. It shows real data from 2015 through 2019. On the y-axis, it's cubic yards. And then on the x-axis, it's each month of the year. And then it's color-coded by year. So you can see there's a few spikes. I can't really put my finger on why there's some anomalies, but most of it makes sense. Like you see peaks in November, December, leaves have fallen, people are raking them up, they're disposing of them before winter. And then of course in January, February, you hardly see anything because there's no leaves on the trees. They've already picked them up. And then you see it starts to tick upwards around March, just barely, but then more significantly April, May. So we did look at doing something different with yard waste. There's a Excel table that lists regular trash, recycle, yard waste. When you look at those year over year, you'll see that there was a jump in April 2020 due to the stay at home. So we had roughly 215 ton of regular trash versus the same time last year in 2019, it was 206 ton. and it was less years prior to that, 2015 through 2018. What's kind of unusual is that we saw a reduction in March of 2020. We're waiting on the results from Republic Services for April of 2020. I would expect it would stay fairly flat or close to the same number for 2019, roughly 55 ton. And then what I also included were the cost per unit. So there's a cost per unit for Republic. And in March, we were paying roughly $103.11 per ton. And that was after we got our rebate through them. That's how much it costs us for disposal with Republic. Versus if you look at regular refuse where we haul it to Valley Park, that cost was $54.07 a ton most recently in April of 2020. And it's actually stayed the same rate, January, February, March, April. It's a flat rate that we're being billed through that company for regular trash. And then we also included the recycling and trash map showing you where you live, what we do. And then Wednesdays, of course, are yard waste. And then we also included, just for everybody's benefit, what we talked about in 2018. We actually did an RFP, if you remember, 2018.
Well, hey, Dan, could I just drag you back
Yeah.
a little bit before we get into that? Because I kind of thought that the mayor was looking to see if there's something we could do with the yard waste, going from, every Wednesday to every week to once a month.
Right.
Of course, you'd be picking up a whole month's worth of yard waste in
Yeah, that's
one
the variable.
month.
It's hard to predict.
Well, I know, but I mean, do we even have the capacity? Are you running all 3 trucks at 25 yards a truck? Is that what it is, yard waste
Currently, we're running all 3 trucks
on that Wednesday?
on Wednesdays. Yes. Yesterday, we ran all 3 trucks and they worked till probably 2 in the afternoon.
So if we're looking at your April figure of 266 cubic yards, I mean, you're talking about making several trips with 3 trucks to wherever you dump this stuff.
Right.
Can that, if you went to once a month, can that be done in one day?
I think that it would trigger some overtime. We could put more public works staff on it, but you're still limited to the 3 large trucks. And as you already stated, there's 25 cubic yards is the max you can cram inside that hopper in the back. And everything goes down to St. Louis Composting, which is in Valley Park. So that's at least a 20 or more, well, probably more for that since it's traveling at a lower rate of speed, probably a 30-minute one-way trip. And then you're queuing up to empty. You have to wait for others to get through the queue for you to empty and then leave.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing was we didn't know how it would affect the residents. They're used to putting it out weekly. Are they going to store it, or are they going to try to compost it? There's no easy way to predict that.
All right. Andy, did you have something?
Couple of questions. If you're looking at going yard waste once a month, currently, how much of your yard waste is put in the paper bags versus is put in solid containers that you all pick up? If I go to once a month arrangement, do you foresee people taking yard waste and just intermixing it with their trash? And then you're going to come back and tell me that you can't take the trash because we've got crisscrossing.
Right. If you did cross-contaminate, if you put your yard waste like you had half of it filled up with leaves and you put 2 trash bags on top to hide it, we would put a sticker on there and then you'd be required to try to separate it.
If we presented to the residents that due to what we're looking at and cost-saving methods, if we promoted that they cut their grass and not bag it, do you foresee a reduction in yard waste on something like that?
Yeah, that I don't know how to answer.
That I just see that, I think, from what I've watched on the pickups and the goods, you do have an awful lot of neighbors that are using the paper bag method.
Right.
I don't think you're going to find those people willing to store those bags for a full month. And I was going to say, and the minute you throw it out on the curb and stuff, I think you end up with a mess. And I just don't see it as being a functional solution.
Nancy?
I have a question about, I mean, if we did this, maybe there's a way to do it every other week, or you do it once a month part of the year, but then come fall when people are picking up leaves, I mean, you'd have to do it more frequently than once a month
Right.
in the fall, or we just have leaf bags all over, blowing over and people driving into leaf bags. I mean, we wouldn't have to, but it would create a mess. Maybe there's some
That's why I
sort of
wanted to
hybrid
include the
solution.
graph, just so you could see graph or visually, we do have that cyclical condition. So by say November, December, there's no way you're going to do it every fourth week. It's just going to spill out everywhere. I know when I had to store mine for a few weeks, it's like I double bagged it, then I wound up triple bagging it because the bags kept deteriorating. Anytime they get a little bit of moisture, the craft paper, the glue starts to separate.
Yeah.
I don't like having an extra can, so I use the bags myself. And then maybe you could, like in the beginning, maybe January through say March, you could skip then because there's hardly anything out there. If anything, we're picking up Christmas trees January and February, undoubtedly. But those are handled differently. We don't actually include those with yard waste. We pick them up and then we actually mulch them up.
Brandon?
I mean, it seems like the real savings here is the wear and tear on the truck. If this could delay having to buy a new multi-$100,000 truck, that's the real savings that we would achieve. I mean, I would be in favor of what Nancy suggested, that maybe we dial it back instead of going once a month, maybe once every 2 weeks, see what that is. And then also the residents have an option if they need a pickup on an off week or something, maybe they have like a ton of stuff that would be acceptable to call Public Works, and we could, you could send out the truck maybe for the smaller truck to pick it up if that's the case.
Okay.
Maybe, Brandon, maybe you could put together what the cost savings would be if, and you know better than we do on what it takes to do a turnaround of all the pickup on Wednesdays. But based on your loads that you have to pick up throughout the year, when can we do just 2 times a week? When can we drop it to 1 time? 2 times a month. When can we drop it to 1 time a month? And
Yeah, I think what we can do is look at the graph and then do what you're suggesting is look at the individual tickets and figure out how many trips we make each of those months, because we actually have the receipts, and it would probably have to be broken up by months, like a grouping. You would say, well, these months would be every other week, and then these other months would be every, single week, like say November, December.
yeah, and give us,
We
the
can rerun
labor
that
and
scenario.
the labor and fuel and dump. I guess the dump fee would be the same because you're still hauling the amount of stuff, but see what the savings would be there. And like Brandon says, cut down on wear and tear of that truck.
Yeah, I do have a spreadsheet that's already set up that shows labor, it shows disposal fee, and then it shows fuel.
Andy, you have a question?
I got a suggestion to consider. How much resistance do you think you'll get from the residents if you change your trash service and yard waste service as it stands right now? You're looking at a potential major change with what we're going to do at the Brentwood Forest. As I understand it, looking at this whole service that the city's providing, maybe it is time that the city says, residents, it's going to cost so much a month to have this service. If your intent is to try to make it economically work for us and affect with the bad budget that we are looking at, maybe instituting a fee might be a better solution with less resistance from the residents.
I think we're trying to just keep it to yard waste right now, and some type of plan for that, Andy.
I understand, but your intent
We can get
is
in.
to... Go ahead.
The next subject, when we get into looking at privatizing, why don't we have that discussion then? But Dan, do you have those figures? I'm not seeing it in any of the handout. Is it there?
No, I have a separate spreadsheet. I didn't include it. I didn't want to do overkill. It was just basically to show you how the yard waste fans out throughout the course of a year. But I have a separate spreadsheet. I can upload that. We can talk about it again in June.
Yeah, does anybody, can we take that subject up in June, everybody? Let Dan put the numbers together and
Yeah.
just, let's look at the numbers on yard waste. All right,
Yeah, and the other reason why going so long between cycles was to try to keep the interactions between the staff and the residents putting stuff out at a minimum. So it made sense to try to go 3 weeks, as long as you could before you would actually pick up someone's craft paper bag or their plastic receptacle.
One comment, I like actually waiting just because it allows us to start socializing this with our residents and kind of getting their feedback and their suggestions. It could be that a lot of residents say, yeah, it'd be fine, every 2 weeks or once a month, that's not a big deal. Stuff doesn't stink, so we can sit around, or start getting a feel for the pulse of the town.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
We'll carry that over then. And the other part Dan was gonna work on, back a couple of years ago, and Andy will remember, we kind of looked at put out an RFP with some private vendors to get an idea of what the cost would be going private compared to the cost that we had in supplying it ourselves. And, it's up to you all what you decide, but I thought maybe now's a good time to at least look at those numbers again, especially when we're looking at a truck purchase next year. And Dan, if you want to elaborate on what you put together so far, but you can kind of see in his packet the information that was back in 2018. I think we looked at that. And you can kind of see there's a crossover point when we have to start supplying new trucks. And so if you want to take it from there, Dan, and just give some background on it.
Yeah, there's the memos in there that you made reference to. So you'll see that there's an August 20th, 2018 Sanitation Services RFP. We discussed it. There was a motion to not pursue the privatization after we looked at the different cost analysis, but I just wanted to reevaluate it. If we were to have signed that contract with Waste Connections back in 2018, their fiscal year 2020 contract would have been locked in at $582,113. Our budget in our budget book, the adopted budget book, shows $603,967 was budgeted for sanitation, and that doesn't include workers' comp or capital purchases. So if you made a capital purchase of a truck or something, it wasn't included in the 603,967. But your truck purchases are captured within the 5-year analysis. So when you look at the 5-year analysis, Brentwood's 5-year total was $3.551 million, and Waste Connections was $2.984 million. So they were roughly 3, and we were 3.5, if you look at it that way. The cost of recycling, of course, has gone up. So I would suspect if you did this RFP again in 2020, their prices would increase over the 582. I don't see how they'd be able to hold it that low. That's just my feeling on that. And I also included, there's a PowerPoint, just a few slides of the sanitation vehicles. It shows you the 4 that we use. 3 are large trucks. Truck 3 is only a F-250 with a dump bed. And we do need to, it is in the 5-year capital to replace 1 truck in 2021 and the other one in 2023. When the 2018 memo came out, it was actually 21 and 22. It was back to back. But since then, it's been staggered in 21 and 23. So that is going to come at a hefty cost because most of those trucks are right around $250,000. I'm looking at a possibility of leasing such a truck, but then you would have a payment every single year. You'd have the option to buy it at the end of your lease, or you just continue with payments, but then you wouldn't have the escalation in maintenance. We're seeing escalation in maintenance because they're ending or nearing the end of their useful life cycle. One's a 2011, the other's a 2013. Even though they're diesel, they still have hundreds of thousands of miles when you figure in the hour meter plus the odometer reading. And it's not like taking your Volkswagen to the dealership. This is something that, you know, when we had an air brake system failure, it was, you know, $3,000-$4,000. And I would, you know, have a heart attack if you told me that on my Nissan. So.
Any questions for Dan? So I'm just trying to see if the committee has any interest in, you know, at least just putting this out for bid. You know, since then, as Dan has said, recycle has changed. And just to get some feel for numbers on what the difference is between privatizing and us doing it ourselves. You know, and I'd probably want Dan to mention in the bid process that our guys would have first crack at hire with the new company if we made that decision. Any thoughts, Andy?
I'm not in favor.
I can't hear you, Andy.
I'm not in favor of looking to privatize this service. I think the city's doing a good job, and I think your residents have come to expect it. Again, I think you can try to make your costs look a little bit better if you charged a fee for it instead of offering it for free to work with. I think the residents wouldn't give you a whole lot of grief over it to go after. I would tell you that if you're looking to try to save cost, instead of paying $108 a ton with rebates and drop it all to straight trash and pay the $54 a ton to work with. You can cut some of that bill down if that's what you're looking to do to try to save things.
Well, that might be, but we don't have anything to compare it to right now. I mean, I'm not looking to change anything. I just want to see the numbers. And that discussion could be had then.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'd just like to see a show of hands if we want to direct staff to put out an RFP for a sanitation. Who's in favor? Nobody wants to look at the numbers? No.
Steve, I'm totally in favor of it. It's been less than 2 years since we did it already, though. I mean, I know things have changed right now, but it just seems like the decision we made less than 2 years ago still holds. Maybe it's something we look at next summer, but.
Well, we just, the truck purchase coming up, and like I said, I don't know how the change in recycling would affect these numbers. But, all right. Just thought I'd try. Nancy?
I know I talked to you earlier in the week about this, but this is something I've actually sort of just chatted about with a couple neighbors, and everybody loves our trash, even though it
I know.
it's like such a thing to outsource, but people love
Well,
our
how did that survey rank our trash collectors?
Second to the top.
It's
Yeah,
still,
I can't hear you.
it's still number one in terms of services that residents like. Number one, and I think fire is number two, and police has come up. They're now number three.
Okay. All right. I
Why
tried.
mess with success?
All right, we'll drop that for now.
Thank you.
Move on to new business. We have the Brentwood bound demolition bid. I don't know who this is.
Dan.
It's me.
Dan?
Yep. If you look in your packet, there's a bid tab that lists the results of the 5 different bidders. There was an RFP that went out. This is for phase 1B for the demolition bid package for Brentwood bound. And the locations of the sites are included in your memo. So there's 4 on Mary Avenue. There's 1 on Bompart, a couple on Brentwood Industrial, and then 2 on Breckenridge Industrial. So we actually had really good bids. The lowest is $450,497, and that's with Marshall Wrecking LLC. We actually had, we shortlisted it to Marshall and Spiritus, and we actually conducted interviews with them. So we wanted to make sure that everybody included everything in their bids that they should have, that they followed the specs and the overall RFP. everybody did. So Marshall was still the lowest. They didn't change their numbers or anything. They can do it for that price. They can do it according to our schedule. So basically, we just need a motion to take it to the full board. One thing I wanted to add besides the 497 was a not to exceed amount of $45,050, which would just be a 10% contingency for the overall ceiling. We're still well below the engineer's estimate, but I thought, well, that way I don't need to come back to the committee or the board if there is a change order. The Spiritus contract did not have a change order that caused us to need additional cost. There were, I think, maybe one change order, but it was at no cost. We basically traded off something else.
Andy, did you have a question?
I was just curious, who were we using? Spiritus is what had got the phase one bid, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
Spiritus just completed phase
Phase
one.
one. And they came in second bidder on this one.
Correct.
I'll make the motion to recommend to the full board the Marshall Wrecking LLC with the $450,497 bid with a contingency of $50,000 for potential change orders.
Second.
All right, all
No,
in
wait a
favor?
Wait a minute, Steve, if I may. There is no real fast time frame for this. We could do a staggered reading, which would put you June and July, or
What-
you need it all in the one.
It's actually a resolution, so it would be on the consent agenda. That's where I placed it currently for Monday. But there's still, it's not like they would start right away, but we want to try to get the contract in their hands, get it signed, so that then they could get their permits and turn. I mean, there's still abatement. We're just trying to get it started as quickly as possible so that. they
Then
can
let's
do it.
do the first and second approval in the same meeting, please.
Okay. All in
Thank
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? None? All right. All right, I don't know if this is gonna be a great debate, but we got our Brentwood Days discussion on whether to have it this year. Is this you, Eric?
It is. So I was just asked to put together some thoughts about Brentwood Days as we stand today, May 14th. And so I won't belabor it as it is 7:40. I know people are probably tired. But in my opinion, it really comes down to safety versus community engagement. There's obviously all the safety reasons that we're staring at even as we reopen St. Louis County. There's still all the unknowns, the social distancing and the fear of what may be coming through the second round, as all scientists are telling us. The community engagement is, we know what Brentwood Days means to this community. We know how much fun we have during it, except for maybe last year when it poured on us for about a good half hour. Although I do remember one alderman rushing through the rain, so I do appreciate at least him enjoying that night.
It was
So-
Plufka.
But, so again, the community engagement aspect, is not one to overlook as well. But the important things to talk about is that if we move forward and I'll go backwards first, the staff preparation is that we haven't started yet. And again, it's just more than anything else, we've been dealing with COVID-19. And so, and by this point, we've done a lot of things already. And I think I mentioned, we've already booked, typically we've already contacted food and booth vendors. We've already reached out to parade participants. We've usually booked entertainment by this point. We've communicated with the carnival rides and fireworks. We started reserving operational items, electric golf carts, portable toilets, things like that. And not that we can't do it. It's not like we're behind. Well, we are kind of behind the eight ball. We just need to start moving now. And we can definitely do it. The other, again, not as important, or while important, it's just something we need to bring up, is the financial aspect. The $100,000, the $80,000 of the event was put in the cost containment. I believe Janet added that to the cost containment. So we are looking at that as part of the cost containment. We should expect to see a decrease in sponsorship revenue this year. I don't think we'll see any sponsorship, except for, as I say every time, we'll definitely get Navigate Building Solutions to give us money. I mean, that is definitely one sponsor I will count on for the next couple of years, and they will sign me a check happily. So we'll definitely have Navigate in our sponsorship, but every other sponsor is going to be kind of hard to kind of get money from this year. Our two biggest contracts, which is the carnival rides and fireworks, account for 55% of the operational costs. Those are the two big ones. And obviously, while we're still in this sort of questioning time of the state of the world, we can renegotiate the contracts and get out of those contracts most likely. But if we move forward and then have to cancel later on, we'll be stuck with those bills. So even if we wait till, we do July or August, if we move forward with this event, I think that the idea for us is that we just need to be, know that it's a good chance that, much like weather, there's public health guidelines that we have to follow. And there's also a chance that we would need to cancel. And if we longer, there'd be monetary implications to it. So that has to put together, and happy to answer any questions.
Brandon?
Well, I was going to make a motion that we direct staff to cancel those contracts immediately. I don't know if we need to run that through the big board, and then we can make decisions closer, but to get us out of those as quickly as we can.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah. All right. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
No, again, I'm not 100% sure if it needs to go to the board. I think Paula can answer that for me. If not, I can start on this tomorrow.
We can just committee direction. It's okay.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, we've authorized BOLA to be able to
Yeah.
do the decisions. And all she has to do is notify the board in 72 hours. If you do it right, BOLA, it comes up in Monday's open discussion if we wanted to let the board members chime in.
I'm shaking my head.
Yep.
Okay.
So
That's the process.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on that?
Nope.
So we're nixing it. All right.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I think the expenses should be nixed, but there may be a way to celebrate Brentwood days via a large, like some of the stuff that's in here, a larger parade, just the firefighter and police parade was so well received, and I think there are ways to make this community feel as great about it as they always do without having the actual festival.
Yeah, there's two things we can obviously do, and one is if this thing does decline a little bit and we can do a little bit more and we can have more people gathered around, we can do a smaller type event like Light Up the Fall, which is what we did a few years ago. And we did it again last year for the centennial. We'll put that together fairly quickly and again had something. And then secondarily, for still within kind of these guidelines, my thought process was we could do a longer parade, and as long as we don't have walkers, we could expand the parade throughout the entire city and kind of celebrate that way as well, which is, I think I did put that in my memo. So
yep, you did.
Be a canceling, it just be a revisiting of what we will do this year.
Just have to see how this thing plays out over the summer, and we can kind of make judgments as we go.
And we can bob and weave pretty quickly if we need to.
Yeah. Okay. Is that it?
Yep.
All right.
Motion to
Shelley?
adjourn.
Well, wait a minute. Shelley, no citizen comment? All right. Go ahead,
Motion.
Andy.
Motion to adjourn the Public Works meeting of May 14th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
No.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Shelley, does it do us any good to get these guys to look at this again as to why I'm having trouble logging in?
Well, I don't know if you didn't receive my emails, but I offered to give it another try on a different day.
Can you set up a dummy meeting that I can log into to see if we can get it to work? I've got a gentleman who is my IT guy